all the Pokemon-inspired games, I appreciate Temtem's efforts the least. Despite the fact the game initially enjoyed decent success in its early access, the fanbase has since mostly turned against it. But what exactly happened? I'm here to break down what went wrong with Temtem. Temtem has some of the worst game designs I have ever seen, with the biggest standout being fertility that only serves as an arbitrary limit on how many times a Temtem can breed before it runs out. The game in general is also very grindy, hurling tamer battles after another with a lot of backtracking in the overworld that gets tiring after the first island. Not to mention fast travel, which costs Pansam unless it's a station, is locked behind a side quest, with some not even aware Temtem even has one. Speaking of which, most of the side quests are just boring fetch quests that go back and forth. As others have complained before, Temtem doesn't respect your time, which will be important later on. The economy is infamously stingy, with clothing and even healing items costing a fortune. Most of the activities are meant to cater to a competitive crowd with tedious grinding attached to them, but the player base is more interested in their PvE content instead. As for the PvP, I personally find it weak. There is a lack of variety in the meta and resources for beginners, as well as strong cover by requiring players to breed 8 instead of the usual 6. The game balance isn't strictly better than Pokemon as others claim either, in spite of the lack of RNG in its combat. In fact, it can get embarrassingly worse at times. Despite being touted as Pokemon if they listen to the fanbase, Temtem is anything but that while being swift to blame the fanbase when things go awry. A notable example being ignoring the casual players in favor of the PvE players, which are few and far between. After the game left early access, they introduced microtransactions to the game, which weren't well received by the fanbase, especially the Battle Pass. While others have the leeway of being free to play, Temtem is a paid game. Granted, these are purely cosmetic, but that alone is enticing enough for players to spend money on, especially with the aforementioned economy issues. The Switch port is infamous for its poor performance, which may have been a direct result of the Switch only having 4 GB of RAM. Despite what the minimum system requirement on Steam recommends, 4 GB is not enough to run Temtem. Trust me, I tried. It took a long time for Crema to get around fixing its Switch port. And then there's the battle camera update. Players have complained about the erratic camera movement and asked for Toggle to turn it off. Rather than addressing the issue immediately as anyone else would, Crema infamously threw a tantrum about it, demanding that fans should only give feedback if it's in their favor. It's only after numerous complaints that they eventually implemented the toggle. As with its main inspiration, Luma is Temtem's own spin on shiny Pokemon. One advantage Luma has over it is that they always come with 3 perfect SVs, which are IVs but inflated. Temtem will later introduce Umbra, which comes with all perfect SVs and 8 techniques, but only has a whopping 1 in 75,000 chance of encountering one, in addition to completing a post-game quest to unlock Umbra. For reference, you're more likely to encounter Mirage Island in Gen 3. Not to mention, in order to get Luma drops to purchase consumable radars to increase the odds, you have to give away a Luma Temtem. At this point, you may as well just gamble at the casino. Having all Umbras in a shadowy silhouette with glowing eyes doesn't sound too appealing either. They also changed how free tab works. Prior to the update, it served as the best method to earn Pansons by releasing any Temtem. Now it requires players to release a specific Temtem at a specific amount to be rewarded. Needless to say, this change is poorly received by the player base due to being worse in every way. Despite the backlash, they have yet to adjust Freetab in any way. I am not joking when I said it has some of the worst game designs I have ever seen. After introducing the third mythical Temtem, Galeos, in the Umber update, Drama announced there are no further plans to add any new Temtem or island. While giving excuses such as not worth the time or effort on something that can be quickly completed, or risk being pay to win by being DLC. Not to sound entitled or anything, but most players should expect an MMORPG to be regularly updated, which Crema then claimed it was always going to be an MMO light. Players eventually got fed up with Crema's constant mistreatment and only doing the bare minimum when it comes to updates, while expecting players to enjoy mindless grinding with little payoff, resulting in them seeing what they have praised before in a more cynical light such as the story and the LGBT representation. Around that time, Crema released a separate Temtem Showdown on Steam, which allows players to freely customize Temtem for PvP. The more convenient features, such as adjusting TVs, are exclusive to Showdown, which is baffling to say the least. Because most players just aren't interested in the competitive scene, Temtem Showdowns met with little fanfare. Those that have tried out criticize its UI. More specifically, the lack of information provided to newer players. Rather than making any sort of improvements, Crema pulled Temtem Showdown out of Steam along with events in the main game. Despite the exciting name, these were just grindfests with FOMO rewards. Seeing as the game is unsustainable from their point of view, Crema moved on to Temtem Swarm, which is yet another Vampire Survivor clone that no one asked for. They later announced Temtem would stop receiving major updates after 1.8, claiming they are unable to provide endless content that the fans demanded when no one did. Considering indie game developers are known for their dedication, it's so jarring to see this kind of behavior from them. Although the 1.8 update fixes several issues players had, such as removing microtransactions and the ability to skip animations, something is a bit too late, and the damage has already been done. By that point, most players have moved on, especially with Palworld explode in popularity. There is a saying of, if it's not fun, why bother? And Temtem is the epitome of that. Nonetheless, it's still a shame, as fans were initially passionate about the game, only to be left disappointed in one way or another. But on the bright side, there's a healthy amount of monster taming games popping up since its release. It might be worth checking some of them out if you're still feeling the itch of a Pokemon alternative. Anyway, this is my first and last video on Temtem so I can spare everyone from my dreadful voice.